All right, everybody, welcome back to the Move podcast. Talking about stage 7. Alain, what we do?
Stage 7, Mont-de-Marsan to Bordeaux. Mont-de-Marsan to Bordeaux.
It's less funny when it's Bordeaux. I mean, everybody kind of knows how to say that and feels like they've been there because they probably had enough to drink from there. As it is each and every day, the entire tour brought to you by Ketone IQ. We'll get into that a little bit later. More of the same. Jasper Philipsen, clearly the fastest guy in the race, although there were other highlights there, stuff we'll talk about later. Of course, we alluded to it yesterday, Mark Cavendish continuing to chase history. So we'll break all that down here in a bit. But before we do, today's show brought to you by Caldera Lab. First impressions matter. There's just no two ways around it. What is the first thing that someone notices about you? In most cases, like it or not, it's your face, and more importantly, your skin. If you aren't already, it's time to put your best face forward. Caldera Lab is clinically proven to reduce wrinkles, which everybody at this desk should be listening to right now. Caldera Lab creates high-performance men's skincare products, and the regimen leads off their product lineup, a twice-a-day routine to transform your skin. The regimen consists of the clean slate, the base layer, and the good. The clean slate starts and ends your day. The base layer is your daily moisturizer that hydrates your skin. And the good is your go-to at night before bed. They even have this eye serum, which apparently George is doing right now. It's called the Icon. And just remind folks about something happened at Flanders. Like you dropped some Caldera Lab when you were on that trip, and apparently you were like on the ground licking it up.
Yeah, first of all, I keep this stuff in my bag all the time, at all times. And I thought I had screwed it back on, but I didn't. I kind of placed it on accidentally. I'm very clumsy. If you know me, everybody knows that I'm clumsy. Put it over, and it fell all over the floor. So I was out. I was without the good the whole trip of Belgium. I was trying to like scoop it up from the floor. I was like, 2004, just to give me enough drops for the rest of the trip.
And how'd that work for you?
Not great, but I got a little enough of it back in there.
Special offer for our listeners. You get 20% off with the code THEMOVE over at calderalab.com. That's CALDERALAB.com. That's 20% off with the code THEMOVE at Caldera Lab. Also today brought to you by Roka. Roka has invented a completely new class of eyewear. Glasses optimized for performance. No other eyewear brand can keep up with what these guys and gals are doing. They just keep making their stuff better and better, whether it's on the performance side, the casual, cool side, walking through airports with the shades on side, or on the prescription side, whether it's real prescriptions like JB has or just readers like George and I do. They're unbelievably lightweight. They will never slip. So no matter how much you sweat, they were not going to slip off your face. And not only are they working with great cyclists, they're working with a bunch of folks in the special forces, other champion athletes, and they are hand-built in our hometown of Austin, Texas. Totally kick-ass crew. Rob and the whole crew down there, I just love them, making moves. The Move listeners get 20% off. Just go to Roka, ROKA.com. That's for 20% off, and enter the code THEMOVE. We were riding out yesterday, and dude went the other day. I was with HR. I said, you see that guy? He was rocking a pair of cool Rokas on the bike path here in Aspen. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, you see him everywhere now.
I just needed him to yell out, be like, I bought these because of you. I was thinking it. Anyhow.
Yep.
Stage 7, Jasper Philipsen. It often happens, right? When somebody is that fast, obviously he's fast, but that good. It's just, and George, you've been in those trains and in that position a lot more than certainly any of us, but the confidence that comes with that, you just know, like the finish line's there, and it just gets easier and easier. He made it look easy today.
He did, and arguably he didn't have the perfect lead out. I mean, Van der Poel did a great one, but he pulled off a bit too early, kind of left him out in the open, sort of in the wind, middle of nowhere. You don't want to be in that position, but he was able to react and unfortunately jump right on Cavendish's wheel, which, we're watching the sprint. And a guy like Cav, I know him so well.
You too.
And he's one of the most experienced. No, he's the most experienced, most successful sprinter of all history,
of all time,
in our sport. And when he gets out of the saddle and he knows that he can sprint the whole way to the line. It's not like let me go and see if I feel good and make it. No. So when he sat down, in my mind, and I actually said it to you guys, I go, wait a second. He never takes off and then sits down and then gets back up. So I'm thinking something must have happened. Mm-hmm. And Lance, you saw what happened.
Well, before that happened, or before as we were watching the sprint unfold, it was interesting. And this is for all listening or watching at home. If you could just have a seat in the living room where we were, and there was only 4 or 5 of us down there today, but Higgs, George was watching the race and pointing out where Cav is. Of course, they look like, from the helicopter angle, look like a bunch of ants going down the road. So George identifies him right away and says he's in the perfect place. And this is like a K&a-half to go, 30 back. And I'm like, feels like he's like not in the perfect place. But George, you knowing it so well, and of course it ended up being that way. I did see the report that came out right after the finish says he was bitterly disappointed. And this, to your point, George, you saw him sit down and said that's not normal, because when he goes, and you got to keep in mind he's very small and he gets super low and he has so much power and so aero that when he goes, he never sits down. And he sat down with 150 to go.
Yep.
George Amia said that something's wrong. He said, I jumped, Mark Cavendish says, I jumped when I wanted to, but unfortunately I had a problem with my gears when I was sprinting. It went from the 11 back up to the 12, and I had to sit down to get it back to the 11. So I stood up and it went back again to the 12. I'm pretty devastated, actually. The boys did a good job. It was one of those situations where it's not meant to be. But it was, watching this man who knows Cav probably better than anybody outside of maybe Renshaw and a few others. George knew immediately. Like this.
Well, and watching him so far back, as we were saying, 2-3K to go, he's 25, 30 back. In fact, he wasn't even in the screen at some points. But to me, it's sort of an indication that, okay, I have maybe one guy on my team that can help me in the last final kilometer, so what do I need to do? He probably knew exactly which way the wind was coming, knew that there was going to be room to go, so he was probably just trying to hang back and stay out of trouble and move up at the perfect time, which we saw it. I mean, that was his best chance today thus far, was to win that race, and he has the power. And I noticed the other day in the sprint, he actually didn't even really get the sprint. When he went to go, he got boxed out by Groenewegen, had to sit up for a second, ended up getting 5th. But I can tell he's got that power. He just needs some open space and perhaps get lucky on a good lead out. But he has the power, no doubt, to win a stage of the Tour de France.
It looked like he had the speed of Philipsen at a certain, before he had to sit down.
The jump was insane.
Yeah, he had a gap.
Had he not had to sit down and switch back into gears and then switch back up again, I think he wins that. Because it was very strange for me to see him sit down, one, as we just pointed out, but two, the fact that Philipsen was able to jump on his wheel and go right around him. Because at that speed, one little loss of momentum and you just lose everything.
So if you don't know what George knows and what he saw, and you just watch it, when Philipsen goes, you're like, oh, well, I mean, that wasn't even close, because he was flying by him. But if you know now what we're hearing now, and as George was laying out during the stage, and it makes that big of a difference, at least we can leave with the consolation that he's got the legs. If all things had been perfect.
And that was he came with momentum. I think he purposely did that to get that jump on Philipsen, where he'd perhaps get a gap before Philipsen was able to get on him. But the fact that he had to sit down, switch, or the gear jumped, that gave Philipsen enough time to get around him and made it look almost easy going around him. But I feel like if he was able to keep that momentum all the way to the line, it would have been a whole different situation.
Wouldn't want to be that mechanic tonight.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a big opportunity.
Well, he has what we guess is 3 more chances.
We're going to talk about tomorrow. It's towards the end of the show. I don't think that tomorrow is one of those days. You could look to the stage in the Moulin, stage 11, although it's also not necessarily an easy stage. And then you have to go down, and then you hate to do this because you start getting down towards the end, and it's a real nail biter. You got to go all stage 18 into Bourg-en-Bresse. So you got 11, 18, and then you got Paris. There's really, and some of those are a stretch. So there's 3. All the rest are there's the one-time trial, and all the rest are seemingly in the mountains. So,
and Cavendish has already announced that this is his last season.
Boy, it crosses your mind, doesn't it? The way you were laying out about how he looked in the sprint and how when he went is the first thing that came to mind. I was like, are we sure? let's not burden him with that. But it is one of those things where you're like,
he's pointed out to me several times that like the sport's different now. The way these guys have to train and prepare. There's no. I mean, of course, we trained super hard back in our day, but we're able to socialize a bit, go out with your buddies and ride. Cav says now all they do is intervals, and like it's almost impossible to ride with your buddies because you got to do intervals all the time, and it's just I just can't imagine how mentally tougher, much harder it is now to do that sort of training. But he's doing it obviously because he's there still sprinting amongst the best in the world. But after a while, it takes its toll, and you know what? Let the man have a nice retirement and enjoy his
you guys have also
ride off to the sunset.
Another difference you guys have talked about is what the sprinters have to get over, the speeds they have to get over some of these climbs in this era.
Well, that's why I fear some of these stages that roll like that because they go so hard, and it just takes enough out of you that you get to the finish and you just don't have it, or a break goes right. And we're talking about potentially a stage 18. Those are stages where GC is largely settled, or guys are 30, 40, 50 minutes down. Those are the stages.
And the teams are desperate for a stage win.
And they're sending these kamikaze attacks, and a team has to control the race. Is Astana going to be the team that controls the stage? I don't know. Probably not.
Well, Jasper Philipsen's win, slightly controversial, similar to what happened. I don't remember if it was stage 3 or 4. In that stage, he swept over to the right of the road. Today, he took to the left and boxed out Girmay, who seemed upset about it.
He was.
Well, I don't think anything came of it.
Like we mentioned, he was stuck in no man's land at the front of the race with 300 meters to go. Way too early to start a sprint, but he's established the position. He's got to jump on the wheel that goes by him. I mean, that's sprinting right there. And yes, Girmay unfortunately got squeezed in between him and Cav, but he's got to see that coming. A guy who's just won 2 stages is not going to just sit there and let the wheel go past him. He's going to jump on it, and he's got the right of way to jump on that wheel.
And if you go watch the footage, whether it's from any angle, it's going to look a lot more drastic. I thought that the finish was extremely narrow. I expected almost a boulevard where much wider. When they rolled into that final 2K, I was like, damn, is this going to open up? And it never did. So when it's that narrow, it looks a lot more extreme. And clearly, I mean, they went straight. If they would have been a question, they would have held him in the hot seat there and made him wait.
Yeah, give me a little more clarity on that. It's because Philipsen was, almost a bike length in front of Girmay. If they were side by side, it would have been a problem.
Yeah, Philipsen didn't even see the guy's bars. It's funny, like whenever I do local rides, and this, put it in perspective for all you local bikers out there. When we're going in a group or something, and someone points to me like, I'm going to get on that wheel, and I'm behind the person, I'm like, you don't need to do that. That's your wheel. You're ahead of me. You're not pointing. Girmay should have known that Philipsen's at the front, and he's won 2 stages. He's going to jump on the next wheel that goes. So he needed to feel Cavendish going and sort of react quicker, not try to go in between that space. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. Philipsen had the right of way there, in my opinion. He was leading, and he was going for the win.
So wait a minute. Did you hear? So you still go out and do rides where it's a thing where like
people will point to me and say, I'm going to take that wheel. I'm like, don't do that.
Like I only ride with folks that are like friends. The few friends that I have.
You don't ride with anybody.
Hold on a second.
You haven't ridden with me. I've been here for a week. You've ridden with me one time. You made me wake up at 6 a.m. to ride with you today. I had to go out of my way to ride with you.
But I ride with folks. We ride 2 abreast. Nobody needs to point out where they're going. These are all friends. So you're out there in like group.
Well, I'm a social rider. Yes, I ride with the people.
It sounds to me like you're doing the weekly races in Greenville where people are like pointing out like.
I do the Tuesday night World Championships with my son. Yes, I do.
Okay. Is that like the Tuesday night we used to have in Austin? Just an informal race.
Every cycling town has that thing.
Informal race.
I had it in Dallas and Plano when I was growing up. Absolutely, every town has that.
Yeah.
The little hammer fest.
Listen up, people. Do not point to take that wheel. If you're ahead, just take it. Okay. Don't do the point. I'm taking the wheel. Just go. You're ahead. It's your wheel. Tip of the day.
Yeah,
that was a free
tonight's group ride in Charlotte. It is going to be a mass pileup, and the guy's going to get them. Go. Fuck it. I mean, George told me my bar's in front of yours, so I'm coming over. And too bad. So sad. Before we talk about tomorrow's stage, today's show also brought to you by AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. All of us literally drink it every day. George, you just hammered yours right before we started the show. I saw that.
Yep.
And for me, I was just sick and tired of taking a bunch of supplements. I wanted a single solution that supports my entire body and covers my nutritional bases on every day. I wanted better gut health. I wanted a boost in energy, immune system support, and I wanted a supplement that actually tastes great. I take it personally. I take it every morning, whether I'm at home or on the road. And so with every daily serving, I'm setting myself up for success with 75 high-quality ingredients that give me the key daily nutrients and support all of these cool things like energy, focus, strength, and clarity, all for less than $3 a day. And, as I like to say, take control of your health. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/themove. Again, that's drinkag1.com/themove. Also today brought to you by HVMN, which is, of course, our presenting sponsor for this year's Tour de France. Ketone IQ, another thing that, by the way, did you have, because we did ride early today. We started because we wanted to get back and watch the finish. I got a bunch of crap this afternoon. We had to ride at 7. Did you hit? I'm sure you were up hammering some Ketone IQ this morning.
Well, I had to steal one from your garage. We don't have any at the bunkhouse, so yeah, I went in your garage and took a Ketone.
So HVMN invented the first drinkable Ketone IQ back in 2017. Their latest innovation has improved effectiveness, taste, and cost. Delivers clean fuel that can cross the blood-brain barrier, supplying your brain and body sustained energy, mental focus, and sharpness, putting you in flow that lasts for hours. By the way, HVMN is not just used by the majority of this peloton, also used, just like other products we talk about, by the Special Forces. I mean, I think the Tour is hard and all these things that we watch every day are hard, but boy, Special Forces, they know how to push it. You can save 30% off your first subscription order of Ketone IQ at hvmn.com/themove. Again, that's hvmn.com/themove, and subscribe upon checkout for 30% off. Last one of the day, our friends over at Huckberry, just Andy and Rich, man, they have built a business, right? Millions of fans, millions of followers. I'm a subscriber to their daily newsletter over at huckberry.com. I get it, and I read it. I read it every day, and there's just all kinds of cool stuff in there. I alluded to the other day about my, hopefully now that I'm talking about it, we should make that a trivia quiz. Who went and watched my segment on crushed ice? It's a big deal to me, right? The Sonic ice. But they did a cool thing for us because we just went through all of the stuff and all of the brands that they have seriously curated. And myself, JB, and George picked out just the things that kind of, that we liked. And so they made us our own curated list over at huckberry.com/themove. JB, very happy. Your big box came here yesterday.
Yeah, I some kind of bear or something rifled through that box.
I did.
I knew you were going to say, so the box showed up.
What happened to this box?
Yeah, exactly. It was a big ass box. And it had, of course, it's Huckberry. So they do a great job. It's like Huckberry tape everywhere. And George just immediately sees good swag. This is the way he operates.
I went through it.
He sees good swag.
Tried it all on.
No, he says, this got to be for me. So
There's some good stuff in
he's
there.
just pulling shit out: shoes, jackets, meat.
Tried it all on.
Meat season. He's trying it on, and then finally somebody's like, "I think that's JB's," and he just left it sitting there. And JB walks over and he's like, "What the hell happened here?" I said, "Yeah, I think George got after it a little bit." And your stuff.
Yeah, and then to that point, people associate Huckberry with all the clothing, all the apparel, but they have a lot of cooking
Did you get the pocket
stuff.
knife?
I didn't get that pocket knife, but they sent me all the cooking spices, all the meat spices.
They got all kinds of cool stuff on there, and the content is cool. They're writing about just stuff that I think they're doing a great job on the editorial side. Again, that's huckberry.com/themove. That's us.
All right, tomorrow's stage should bring back some memories for you.
Yeah.
I think we should talk about that first.
Well, it's and I'm not making this up. Like I I don't know why it is, but when we would race and I knew where the start and finish line was, I was just always trying to get there as soon as I could. I never left and really, I mean, I had to ask myself, it's Limoges, the stage tomorrow finishes in Limoges. That sounds familiar. Of course, the stage was very memorable for me and for the whole Motorola team in 1995 after losing Fabio Casartelli just before that, which most of y'all who follow the sport know it was an awful story. And we just rewatched some of the clips. Newly married, 4-month-old baby boy. Unimaginable. And sadly enough, as we also talked about the other day, recently happened in the Tour of Switzerland. You just can't. We all know this sport is dangerous, whether you're racing or whether you're riding your bike down Main Street. Crashes happen, accidents happen, and fatal accidents happen. But you'd never think you're going to be on a team where you lose a teammate. And unfortunately for us, we were, and actually, unfortunately for everybody in that year's race, you don't leave, even if you're not on the team, you don't leave the race and think, well, it wasn't my team. It affects everybody. So a few days later, had the stage in Limoges, and I believe, if I'm correct, Johan Brunel was in the initial break, and then I just went away and won into Limoges, and I actually think it's a very similar finish, if not the same finish, for tomorrow's stage, which is not a straightforward sprint finish. But that was a bittersweet day for me, for sure. And the other fun factoid about, not that that isn't actually not a fun factoid, but is when you watch the tour and the final stage and you stand on the top step and they give somebody the yellow jersey, they always hold up a trophy, which is the same every year. It's the blue and gold bowl that they hold up. Those are all, and I guess this part of France, Limoges, is where they make all this very fancy porcelain, and so those are all also made in Limoges. So
in this Limoges, I believe, is the start of the Massif Central. Am I correct on that? Which to me is some of the hardest cycling you can possibly imagine when you're racing the Tour de France. Why? Because the roads are just never ending, up and down. Tomorrow is the first real chance for the real rouleurs to get away and actually make it to the finish line. So that is going to be fireworks from the start. I imagine it's going to take a long time for the breakaway to go. And yes, there is a chance it's going to be a sprint, albeit the smallest chance we've had thus far in terms of the relatively flat stages. So I think tomorrow is just going to be a bunch of action. A super hard day to predict. But there's going to be some really strong guys trying to get in that breakaway.
All right. Keep it also in mind, since we've had Philipsen win 3, UAE has won 2. We're getting into another scenario, almost like we had last year. You haven't had that many teams.
Yeah, and it's the first real chance for like a non-true sprinter or non-true climber to actually win the stage tomorrow.
And the other thing about entering into this part of France, as you said, George, the Massif Central, is it's never flat, and the pavement changes. Right, the pavement. I don't know. Maybe they're just, I don't know, are lazy over there. They do chip seal, and not that that's lazy,
rough.
but it's just rough. And
It's just hot, and it's getting hotter and hotter.
I just checking the weather. It's a high of 89 degrees, so not too bad. Could be easily 100 plus out there. So if you were to combine the rolling hills, the chip seal pavement, and 100 plus, and 200 kilometer stage, that starts to be really hard. But the roads just don't roll like you would, a newly paved road.
Maybe they roll better than your era on bigger tires, stuff
for sure.
like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Less PSI, but
yeah.
And tomorrow we could have, if a team like Alpecin Phoenix decides that they want to work for Van der Poel, I mean, they could certainly sit at the front and control it and combine with another team with a rider like Van der Poel to try to keep it a small group finish for the end, which is an uphill finish, 3% uphill finish, and very difficult right before that. So it depends on what the teams want to do. I assume a breakaway is going to happen, but if a team like Alpecin wants to control it, they could do that as well.
It is. I mean, that 3% is for the entire last kilometer is 3%. So it's not an easy finish. I think something gets away. I have to think. But if you look at how, and you can actually see, if you're looking at the profile like we are, you can see when you start to enter the Massif Central. Look at the first 123 kilometers. That's basically pretty flat, right? And then you start to enter into this part of France, and it's a different game. It's tough. It's up and down. The roads are smaller. The one thing I guess we didn't talk about, which who knows, is wind. This is also an area that's very open. A stage like that can certainly be windy. If you don't have the protection from trees or towns, wind can play a factor too.
This might make for a very good and interesting outcomes when we get into stages like this, where a breakaway could stay, and they, Johan and Spencer might pick some riders with some really good odds in your favor if you're interested.
Exactly. I just checked again here, light winds, so that shouldn't be a factor.
All right. Anything else for about today, tomorrow, before we jump into the trivia?
No.
Okay. All right. All right. So Ventum trivia. All right. This is a chance to win a brand new NS1, their road bike. All you have to do each day is answer this question, email it in. They're pulling a name from the correct answers every day. And at the end of the tour, we'll draw one of those for the NS1. Yesterday's question was, what famous sports announcer was in Lance Armstrong's This Is Sports Center commercial? That was
Dan Patrick.
Yeah. Yep. And today's question,
I'll give you another fun factoid about that commercial. I was on his trip to New York, and they wanted to do the Sports Center spot, which they had, at the time they were doing a lot of these that were really funny.
They're always funny.
They're very funny. And I was on this hectic schedule, and I said, or somebody, I obviously didn't say this, somebody said it to ESPN. They said, sure, he'll do it, but you have 1 hour to shoot it. I mean, when has anybody ever filmed a commercial in 1 hour?
Right.
All I had was we shot that thing in 1 hour.
Damn. Wow. Very cool. Here's your question you can answer today, and we'll let you know the answer on the show tomorrow. But what is the longest stage ever recorded in the history of the Tour de France?
Spencer?
I mean, we talked about the brothers winning. That was
425K or something.
Yeah, it was insane. They were on the bike 15 hours.
Do those stages count, like the pre-war stages and the original stage? I mean,
the history of the Tour de France.
Okay. The tour.
So,
well, look, I mean, the history is what it is. I mean, the first tours were 5, 6 stages, and they covered the country, and they had these. They had towns that they always went to. Bordeaux, of course, being one of them. Marseille, another. And Paris, somewhere up in the northwest as well, in Brittany, and they had to get there. I mean, that was one stage. So it's teaser alert for folks that are trying to guess this. If it's anything less than 400 kilometers, don't guess on it. It's not it.
Wow. One of my favorite old clips is seeing the racers just pull over into what's essentially a market or a convenience store and just raiding the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like they just went and just started taking whatever they want. And I'm sure the shop owners are like, hey, it's the tour. Of course.
We're going in, grabbing a glass of wine, having a cigarette.
Yeah.
It was just so crazy.
Amongst other things back then.
Yeah. All right, here are some questions for you guys. We haven't been doing questions for a few days, so thought they might come in handy
That's
today.
because George was so cranky yesterday. He was so riled up that he just said, I'm not answering any questions today. You said that before the show.
I don't remember that, but okay.
I was fired up yesterday.
It says, hi, here's one. Hi, guys.
No regrets.
I always listen to the podcast after work and love your insights into the race. My question, a Tour de France without teams, every rider for themselves, who would win? That's from Cornel in Belgium.
Well, I don't know. It would be somebody. It would be a lot more random than you would imagine. Like there would have to. And teams would start to be, alliances and allegiances would start to be formed along the way anyways, just as probably what happened in the early days, which led us to modern cycling that now has actually teams. I don't know. I mean, if the question is if it was a time trial, I mean, we're still talking about the same two guys, I suspect, that would get around the country just like they will now, faster than anybody else. I don't know. I mean, it would open it up a lot more for really random long attacks, long breakaways, I guess. I've never thought about it, actually.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, this is a team sport. It's like asking who'd win a tennis match without a racket, in my opinion.
Okay.
Hey, at least it wasn't a pickleball analogy. Here's another random theory. I threw this out at Lance earlier. He wasn't too crazy about it. We'll see what you think, George. David writes, remember we were talking about Sepp Kuss not just falling off after a pull on a climb? He says, is it possible that Koos is continuing to ride after being dropped because he is designated to give his bike to Jonas in the event of a mechanical failure?
I mean, he was 3 minutes behind. The car was behind Jonas, so I don't think in that situation. But maybe they want to keep him in the top 10 for strategic reasons. Throw him in a breakaway, make the other teams have to chase. So there's definitely some logic to that. I mean, if a guy like Sepp gets in a breakaway, Jumbo doesn't have to do any work because Sepp can claw his way back into the podium position, and other teams like UAE, Bora, then they're going to have to take over the work. So it could be a strategy where they just want to keep them close to have, perhaps put them in a breakaway one day and make other teams work and give their team a day off. Okay.
Richard writes, people who analyze the Tour de France often talk about controlling the peloton. I have an intuitive notion of what this means, but could you please say a few words about exactly what riders must do to control things? That's from Richard in Los Angeles.
Well, for one, like Johan mentioned yesterday, we would just put 4 or 5 of us on the front and ride hard. So where even if guys were attacking, we wouldn't even try to jump with them. We would stay together. And if you're riding at 45, 50K an hour and somebody's attacking on the front, they can't go 55K an hour by themselves or for a very long time. So at least if you're together and you're riding in the front, which means controlling the race, then you're able to decide, I'm going to accelerate and catch this guy like Jay Hindley right away before he gets 2 minutes with 30 guys. You're able to really decide quickly and be at the front in that controlling position to make sure a breakaway doesn't get too far out of control.
It's all about the tempo.
Yeah.
I mean, that controlling isn't, although there have been times in the sport where you literally on a small, narrow road, you can control the peloton by basically blocking the road.
Yeah.
That's not really a thing anymore, it seems, but just it's all about tempo.
We've tried all different strategies. When we were in the lead with Lance, where we like, okay, there's going to be a shit ton of attacks. We got to go with everything we can and try to not let anybody dangerous go. But that's just so hard. I mean, especially like an area like the Massif Central where the peloton is sitting on your wheel. They're coming down these big hills with momentum. You hit the bottom of this climb, we all know what our legs feel like at the bottom of a climb in the sand. You get 10 guys attacking you full gas, twice the speed as you're going because you're at the front. They're coming with momentum. It's very hard to jump away with those things. So it's better to just ride your tempo and accelerate when you need to with your teammates, and everybody's on the same page that is controlling the race.
Yep.
Mathieu writes, with Pogačar winning the young rider jersey for 3 years in a row, should he be excluded from that jersey competition?
Well, I mean, no, the answer is no. But we commented when one of the first stages he put it on, I looked at JB and I said, Jesus Christ, this kid's still in the young rider category. I mean, it just goes to show you how young and early he started dominating this race. And we haven't even looked, but I'm assuming that this is the last year he's eligible.
Yeah, we haven't looked. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. One more here. This is from Stu. This is a long shot, but I thought it was good. Stu says, I used to ride through Monaco and up the Madone. About 500 meters from the top of the Madone, there was a guy who used to drum on a full drum kit. He would drive up with his full kit in his car and set it up at the top of the Madone and drum away. It was always a boost when I needed it most as I approached the top. He might have been the happiest man I ever saw on the Madone. Was he there back in the days when you would ride up it?
He wasn't. And I'm listening to this story going, God, how did I miss that? Makes me want to go back and do it again. No. The answer is no. That would have... I mean, and if it's the true, sort of 2 Madones that people use, there's kind of the halfway where the village is, and you make that hard left, and then you go all the way to the top. Once you make that hard left, I mean, you are starting to get in the middle of nowhere. I don't know what I would have thought, you don't see anybody. You don't see cars, and all of a sudden you turn a corner, there's a fucking, Lars Ulrich wannabe right there. I don't know. I would have probably fallen off my bike. That would have been sick. But no, unfortunately not. For me.
Okay. One more very lighthearted question because it was a light day here. Kevin says you can see how tight Lance and George are. Were you guys friends before you were teammates?
Well, we've basically been teammates forever.
Yeah.
I mean, it started in 1989 when we were national team teammates, and then almost immediately went into Motorola, and then at first though, I've told this story before, but if this fella hasn't heard it, at first I was like, I'd read all these stories about this kid from New York. Mm-hmm. They were writing about him in cycling, like national magazine. I said, who the fuck's this guy? Right, 14 years old, winning races in Central Park. I really was like, I wasn't down with that. I said, I want a piece of this. And then the guy rolls up and he's all nice and cool, and I was like, oh, bummer. I mean, he could have just been a complete punk then, but it was, we were fast friends.
Yep, we were. Now,
I think you've shared your
first.
your first recollection of him. I think you've shared that before, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lot about him too. How strong
what
he
did
was.
you think of him before you met him?
I didn't really have one thought either way, but he did roll up in IROC Z, all Guido'd out with Z Cavarici
100%.
shoes. It was
100%.
He was on the cutting edge of style back then, and it was it. Like he said, we got along right away.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to pull it up, JB. I remember it's been a minute, and I don't know where you found this, but you found a picture of an old white IROC Z. Maybe you took a picture of it.
I'm always searching the auctions to try to find you the perfect IROC. It was white, right?
It was
what
white.
year?
It
what
was
year?
white.
It was
like an
86.
86.
Yeah.
I'll find you one.
We called it White Lightning, for those who are curious. Yeah, it was.
I just would give anything to see T-tops.
Nope.
No T-tops. I just would give
know.
anything to see you cruising Aspen in an IROC Z with your shirt off.
Oh boy. Please have an animated stage tomorrow, because this is what happens when it's a straightforward sprint stage and the big favorite wins, and we sit around and go, well, what are we going to talk about today? Well, folks, that's what you get. JB says anything to see you driving around Aspen in a white IROC with your shirt off.
That'd be classic. All right. If you have questions you want to ask Lance and George, please send them in. TheMove@wedo.team.
Absolutely.
And I would check out Outcomes today if you want a better idea of what to expect tomorrow.
I think that's where these guys start to shine, and they'll start looking at, they'll know, obviously the parkour, the stage, the profile, but also, who needs it and who's all the dynamics of what team needs it, what rider's out of contract, who it suits the most.
Who's been making the breakaways thus far?
And that's where the odds really, then you're looking at guys, instead of a Philipsen today that was probably 300 to 1, you're going to get these, they're going to be picking people that are 3, 4, 5,000 to 1.
Spencer, Johan, you got my number, right?
Yeah, go throw a little paper down.
Holla at me.
Holla. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow for Stage 8.